storyteller, and that's going to be Keith Horowitz, right here in the front row. And Keith is a visual mind specialist, so let's have a big hand for Keith Horowitz.
I grew up on the East Coast. I lived in New York and New Jersey. And I had some challenges as a teenager. I think most people do. Some of them were a little tougher to take than others. Then I moved in with my mom and stepdad and got some really good guidance from my stepdad. But it was a long time before I was ready to be a parent, to take on being a father. That was scary to me. I moved to central New Jersey near Princeton in 1988. Got married to a woman I'll call Bex in 1989. And then we bought a house, and one night, while I was out taking night classes, I got a page. Okay, it was that long ago, I had a pager. I got a page from my then wife, and she needed me to call right away, but I was in class. By the time I got in touch with her, she shared the news with me. We were expecting a child. I was ready for that. We'd gone through some stages where she slowly introduced me to the idea of parenthood by having me hold a friend's child, and we babysat the neighbor's children for a weekend. I was ready to be a dad. I took it seriously. But I was a little upset because when she was paging me, she couldn't wait to tell me, and she told the neighbors about it first. We went through all the normal steps that you do when you're having a child. Signed up for the Lamaze class, went to the doctor, got her on the prenatal vitamins, and went for the test that you do to make sure everything is okay. The blood test came back. Something wasn't quite right. We went back into the doctor's office, and they said, we need to do an ultrasound. We need to do an amniocentesis where they put in a needle to take out the fluid and test it. And they had us come back in and they told us, we've got some bad news for you. There's something wrong. Your child must have Down syndrome. But then they looked at the amniocentesis results and they said, wait a second, no, this chemical is on the other end of the range. Your child must have a spina bifida. But we can't show you it on the ultrasound. You can't show it to us on the ultrasound? Why not? Well, we think it's small, but it's still so serious that you should not have this child. That was pretty shocking news. That was scary. I'd already seen this little blip on the ultrasound. I was already starting to get very connected to this little being that was growing inside my ex-wife. And she was very upset by this news. She actually threatened to kill the doctors right there. When we got in the elevator, she kicked the door and the emergency telephone fell out. We went home and decided we needed a second opinion. We drove an hour north to New York City and saw a specialist there. He did an ultrasound and reviewed all the paperwork from the first doctors. And he said, you know, it does look like it might be a spina bifida. And I can actually see a small shadow. But I think this is something that you can deal with. This child is still going to grow. He might need some help, but you should continue. Have it checked out again with more doctors in a little while. Just see how it's going. But it should be not that bad, because the spina bifida, just a little hole in the spine, meant some fluid was leaking out. But it was probably fine. A few weeks went by, and we decided, with the health plan we had, we were going to go to the hospital in Philadelphia. Instead of an hour north, we were going an hour south. And at that time, Bex's car kept throwing the belts on the wheels. I remember that drive down, hearing the wheels go as we'd go down the highway. And that was a sound that was going to become very familiar to me. We got there, and they did the ultrasound, and what they saw scared them so much, they said, "We need to deliver this child right away." When we told them how far along the pregnancy was, they said, "Ooh, wait a second, that child can't survive out. We need to keep checking what's going on." And they had us come back week after week after week to watch what was going on. And we saw fluid building up in his chest cavity. It seemed something hadn't formed quite right in the ductwork that led to his heart. And one lung was completely compressed, and his heart was shifted over, and the other lung was being impacted as well. They were scared for this child, for my son. They were ready to have him delivered, but then they said, "Okay, we can keep this going a little while." His movement slowed. The fluid built up more and more, and they started getting scared again. They said, "We need to get that fluid out of him. We're going to have to put a needle in and pull out that fluid." And they stuck that needle into him. And they gave him some anesthesia. And then they used that needle to pull the fluid out of his chest. He didn't like that needle in him. They didn't give him enough anesthesia, because I saw him reach up and grab that needle on the ultrasound. He was a fighter. After that, his movements went up and things were better for a while. We went down not once a week, but twice a week. Down to Philadelphia. And we watched as the fluid built up again and his motions declined again, to the same point. Yet this time the doctors said, "It's okay, don't worry about it." How could you not worry about it? It was a panic for you not that long ago. Bex called them on it. She said, "Are you just hoping that he'll die in there so you don't have to do anything else for him?" That was when they said, "Okay, well, we'll get you in for an induction. We'll get the labor going and have you deliver. And hopefully we can get you to get through that labor quickly enough so that it'll be before the weekend, and all the specialists that he'll need will be able to help him right away. Because you should know, he's going to need a lot of help. He's going to be sickly. He's not going to breathe. We're going to have to put him on a ventilator. He's going to have emergency surgeries right away. And he's going to be impacted for the rest of his life. And you're going to need to take lots of care of him." I love this boy. And he wasn't even born. We needed to have this happen. She went into labor with the chemicals they pumped into her. And they pumped them, and they pumped them, and they pumped them, till she was screaming in pain. Then they said, "Well, this isn't working. It's time for a C-section." And they started rushing around getting ready for the C-section. And they were going to take us right into the emergency room for the C-section. And they said, "Oh, right, you're allergic to latex." Bex was allergic to latex. They had to go back and find all the old equipment that was before latex, all the cloth things. Finally, after many, many hours, Friday evening, they wheeled her into the operating room. It looked like something out of a 1950s TV show with the green walls. A C-section takes a whole lot longer than I would have ever expected. They slowly cut her open. Things were sticking out of her that I'd never seen before. Eventually, they took him out. And they had told me, "Don't expect him to live, don't expect him to breathe, and there's no way he'll cry." They took him out. He cried! And as the nurse took him over to the isolette on the other side of the room, she tripped and caught herself. Luckily, Bex didn't see this. They put him in the isolette and wheeled him off. No time to bond with the new parents. I stayed with Bex while I sewed her back together. And then I got to visit my son in the intensive care unit. Lots of time scrubbing before they let you in there. This big kid, 11 pounds, sitting in this tiny little isolette. They had tubes and wires and a ventilator all hooked to him, helping him breathe. Well, that's what the machine wanted to do. He didn't want that. He wanted to breathe on his own, and he kept setting off those alarms over and over again. But they had a tube in his side that took that fluid out of his body. And after a few days, that fluid stopped coming out of his body. With that tiny bit of help, he healed himself. And they slowly took off the wires day after day, and we were able to hold him without as many things in the way. 11 days later, he came home. My boy was home. But the challenges weren't over. New parents dealing with a C-section. Bex's C-section incision had gotten infected and she had to rush to the hospital. There I was, brand new dad, on my own, taking care of this tiny little baby. Well, tiny for him. Here I was, feeding him the bottles. This tiny little life, this boy, my son. I had not known how much a difference this was going to make in my life. How much I would fall so deeply in love with this child, with my son. But I took parenthood very seriously. I took being his dad seriously. I had to be serious because I was in charge of him. It was just me for a short while. Bex came home and we continued to take care of him and grow. After 3 months, we went back for that checkup to find out what other surgeries he would need to be able to try and function in his life. It turns out, with that checkup, they said, no, he's perfectly fine. Didn't they tell you his lung expanded and he's normal? Normal. Wow. What a relief. But he wasn't done challenging us. We had other things with him. He had something called an intussusception where his intestines got blocked and he had to go in for emergency surgery before he was even a year old. They took out his appendix and they were able to fix his intestines, luckily without having to cut any away. When it repeated again when he was 1.5 years old, we knew what we were looking for, got him to the hospital right away. This time it was to be able to be fixed without opening him up. And this little boy has put me through some real challenges. But that wasn't the only challenge of being a father. We wanted a sibling for him. But that wasn't going to happen easily. There were infertility treatments. And I can tell you, infertility treatments made some of the stresses that we went through with going to Philadelphia look easy. After a while, we realized we had spent way too much without any results. It was time to consider another option. Could we consider somebody else's child as our own? We decided absolutely yes. And after another 1.5 years, we adopted a boy from Guatemala. And another year later, another child, his half-brother, from Guatemala as well. Now I had a family of 3 boys. I never knew how much unconditional love would come from being a father, how much they would challenge me, and how much it would mean to me. Because what I learned from being their father taught me about myself and taught me how to be a better parent. It was tough at times. There would be times where they wanted me to be their friends, their buddies. But I was their father first. I did my best to set good limits and then have some fun. But for all of those people out there who are parents, who are lucky enough to know that level of love, knows that unconditional connection that you have with the child, how much you're willing to give up for your children, and how much it means to you as a person to see them grow, to see them thrive, and to see them do so well. I've learned a lot during this time, and I still have more to learn. They continue to be a challenge to me, Now that they are those teenagers that I was, I've had to put up with some new challenges. I've had to take on some new ways of inspiring them, limiting them, and encouraging them to grow and make their own choices. This has been what I've become as a father, because to me, being a father has been an important part of my life.